19th, 2022, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Just real quick housekeeping. If anybody is leaving the meeting while we're in session and you go out in the hall, please don't have any loud conversations. Happened the last meeting, and it really was a distraction for a bunch of us. There's only a couple people, so let's make sure that we are considering other people if we're doing that. And there's Liz. Come on in, Liz. Liz, do you want to... before you came, I just mentioned that everybody's going to need to be on mic, especially for the microphones. So if you wanted to sit at the table or just come up when you talk, or even sit next to me, whatever you're comfortable with, just have to make sure everybody's on microphone. It's going to be super hard, like we were last year.
Great, thanks.
That said, so we have the SAU with us this evening. Thank you for everybody coming. Jackie, thank you so much. I don't know if I went through it as much as everybody else, but I want to say thank you. The spreadsheet and the links that you put in the email, really appreciate that. I just thought it was very cool. As far as how we wanted to start, Megan and I were talking, we sent questions over the SAU. Thought Jackie and the team, Zach, they did a great job answering them. I wanted to throw it out there. Do we want to just, is everybody satisfied with the answers that we got, or do we want to dive into that, or just start with the warrant articles? I'm open, I think.
No, I'm comfortable with warrant articles are fine. Yeah. The only thing I didn't know is if folks didn't see the public hearing, because when Jackie was here last time, they presented all the budget issues.
Yeah.
They didn't go into the contracts because they hadn't been ratified or whatever,
Sure.
or presented yet. So I didn't know if
Yep.
people on the panel or the committee wanted to hear just a summary of the changes in the two contracts, or the four contracts.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes for everybody. So then the question becomes, do we want to dive into, is that easier to deal with, or do we want to go into the budget stuff first, the warrant, and then do the contract stuff second?
No, I'm
Do
comfortable
we
with the
need to
contract.
discuss the budget if they've already presented it to us once and they haven't any changes?
Only if anybody here has additional questions or what was sent back, and I don't know because I didn't send a note. So I guess we could go around the room. That would make the most sense.
I just go ahead and let Jackie do a quick summary of the changes on the contract, and then if we have questions on that, and then questions on the anything on the budget, or questions that came back from the information. The information was very good, was very detailed.
Do you want to start with the contracts?
Yep.
Because I'm not gonna assume, yeah, thanks, Jackie, that everybody heard it. I know I'm a little scrambled with work stuff. Oh, and the page is shut down. Oh, I had them all opened.
All right,
Wait
Can
a
I-
second. Do
sure.
we need Bill to take notes?
Oh,
Because Leah's not here.
yeah, I expected her here. Bill, would you be willing to do that?
Sure.
Not
Not as detailed as
I
we
missed one housekeeping, especially with everybody but mask. It probably makes sense for the speakers to just introduce who they are, just
Okay.
in case.
All right, I'm Jackie Coe, Superintendent.
Thank you.
I'm presenting what I presented at public hearing last week, and so I'll start with the John Stark Teachers Association contract. That total warrant each year, the first year for 2022, 2023 is $204,770. For 23-24, it's $885,923, and then for 24-25, and again, estimated $190,367. So the average increase for the contract is in year one, 4.2%, or $2,300. In year two, 4.3%, or almost 25,000, 2,500, big difference. And then year three, $2,540, or 4.23%. As far as salary goes, the current starting salary at John Stark is $38,197. This would bump this in year one up to $39,000, year two, $40,000, 40,500, and then year 3 would be 41,700. Our current average salary at Stark is 57,000. In year 2, and you do, I think, have that slide in your packet. All these slides are in the packet from the public hearing. And it would raise it if everyone stays. Of course, the average is who's there and what's their salary. So if our current bargaining unit moves forward with us from year 1, 2, and 3, year 1, it'd be $58,953. Year 2, $61,438. In year 3, $63,978. The John Stark teachers, if you look at the profile, a couple of things. They are, as far as experienced educators, the state, what it means to be an experienced educator is that there are different certifications. So you get your teaching certification, and then after 5 years and going through a few hoops, you get your experienced teacher certification. And that's something like I have to sign off on with the state. And somebody might come to us with an experienced educator certification. And they keep track of that because experience it's some things you just learn with experience. And so having somebody with that experienced educator certification is a good thing. And so you want, the state average for last year, we don't have the data yet for this year, is 86% of educators having that experienced educator certification. Currently at John Stark, we're at 81%. So you're a little off, but we're close. We've had years, like back in 18, 19, we were slightly above the state average. The state average was 86 still, we were at 92. So over the last couple of years, we have hired more people. Nothing that I'm concerned about, but we've hired some younger teachers. And then the other thing is classes that are taught by people who are certified in their subject area. And the state average for last year was 90% of the classes that are taught by people who are certified. That means they don't have like an alternative certification. They're not working on it. We can hire some people who are working on their certification, but they don't have it yet. We're at 91% at John Stark. So the state average is 90. We're at 91% of people who have their certification. So wage was a primary driver in the negotiation. I included in your packet some comparison, both of the average salary, but also where John Stark teachers and where Ware teachers fall if you, at different points on the salary grid. So you've got the beginner, and so comparing starting salary to starting salary. In Stark and in Ware, we're a little bit less than some of our neighbors. Where it starts to be a greater difference is when you start to look at our teachers with 6 years experience, our teachers with 12 years experience. And I broke that down for you in one of the spreadsheets for both the bachelor's track and for the master's track. Just so you could see what goes into that average salary number. The other main shift within the John Stark contract, I think in your spreadsheets, I identified everything that changed. A lot of them are just language clarifications. We did some work around healthcare, and we shifted employee contributions to healthcare from premium to deductible. That conversation wasn't actually, we didn't go into that conversation as a cost savings purely. It was to shift the cost for the employee to a more consumer, something they had control over. We want to control our healthcare costs. That's 17.9% GMR that is impacting our budget. We're trying to figure out ways to tackle that and get that down. That goes down to usage. The prescription choices, it goes down to other choices that employees are making. And so shifting from employees paying premium to paying their deductible, which is an out-of-pocket expense, we felt might have more of an influence, might influence their choices when they're making healthcare decisions. So that shift, we were actually paying that deductible. And by year 2 of the contract, the district won't be paying any of the deductible for Stark. We will be paying the full premium. So the other thing we phased out, which actually will be a savings for the district, is we had a wellness incentive program. People could do things, drink their water, exercise, and they'd earn money to go into their health savings account to help with their deductible. We're phasing out that program, and that was money we were contributing to the, so by the end of this contract, it'll be a $26,000 savings. So that's the Stark teachers contract. Do you have questions on that?
The data that you'd sent, the data for the Finance Committee, where you talk about the exit surveys, is that across?
That's where, that's
It's
just
just where,
where.
okay, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yep.
Sorry, my page closed before you started.
That's
Bill?
that's the retirement, what were you talking about?
Well, I was looking at the exit survey, and I was thinking about
Oh, the exit
retention,
survey,
and
okay.
so I just didn't know,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell which one it was, so that's Stark, so we're talking about, I'm sorry, that's where we're talking about Stark right now.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
There hasn't been, we haven't seen the same in and out with our WARE teachers. We have more experienced teachers. We have more teachers who have been with us long. It's a more of a mix.
yeah, Jackie, I don't know if this was in that contract earlier, the benefit, because it appears in the WARE contract, when the person retires and the opportunity for the healthcare premium to latch onto that, and the district picks up half the cost of a
Yeah.
two-person plan. That's in the WARE one. I don't think that was in it previously. When I read the Stark contract, it's a mixed bag, but it's something similar. Was that in there always before, in the Stark contract?
The Stark contract has a severance payout.
Yeah.
We actually, the change in this contract makes that not a severance. After 15 years you leave, you get X amount of money. And that has been in there for as long as I've
Okay.
been here.
That's the one where it says,
We shifted that, and that actually, instead of being, you can leave for any reason, you actually have to retire.
okay.
So that benefit is only now, well, if it passes, it's only afforded to those folks who retire from Stark.
That's the 45% of the last full year salary. But
Yep.
then it says, and the value of a single health insurance plan up to $4,000 per year for 5 years.
Okay.
Is
Then
that
You
new?
know if that's, it is not new.
Has that always been in there, Zach?
Sorry, repeat the question?
The second part of that, where they get a buyout, or not a buyout, but they retire and they get a certain portion up to 4,000. But then it says the 45% of the last full year salary. But then it says, and the value of a single health insurance plan up to 4,000 per year for 5 years. So when they retire, let's say at age 55, for the next 5 years, are they getting a single health insurance plan paid for by the district?
We did not change that language in the contract.
So that's been in there before?
That is the case, yeah. Now, the only thing that I would caution is there language in there that should I come up to the podium, sorry?
Yeah,
I'm sure, I want to make sure people can hear it.
Thank you.
So it's a good question. So I think that some of those benefits that are in that contract are limited to employees hired before a certain date. So I'd have to go back and take a look at the exact package or passage, but it may be that yes, that is correct, but only limited to a certain number of employees that were hired before a certain date. If it's not contained in that language, then yes, we are paying for a single plan for everybody that is retiring.
If this contract is not approved, my question is it already in the old contract?
Yes.
So they are getting that already?
Yes. That's correct, yeah.
Even, and the where teachers are not unless this contract is passed with the provisions that are in there.
Correct.
Okay, when you said some, it may apply to some people, because if you're hired before, what is it, 2011 or whatever, you get the combination years service and the age, you get to 70, you can retire in the late 40s, but I think the where one restricts it to, you gotta be 55, and you gotta have 20 years continuous service with where.
Yeah.
But then it will allow you to get a two-person plan, 50% of the premiums paid for by the district.
Right.
Well, until they're 65 or 10
65.
years, whichever one's less or something
Yeah,
like that, right?
Yeah, until they're eligible for Medicare.
Correct.
Right.
And at the rate that healthcare costs go up,
Yes.
naturally. But it's limited to 2 per year.
Yeah.
But if you game it out and you had 2 per year in the hopper at any given time, once the system matures, you're gonna have potentially 20 people, 10 times 2.
Yeah.
With 50% of a 2-person healthcare plan being paid for by the district. I don't know what that amounts to.
So,
In today's dollars, we could do that. I don't know what it will be in 10 years from now with
yep.
GMRs going up 17% this year and da-da-da-da-da. So it's a concern of mine of the taxpayers buying in to something that's a benefit
Yeah.
for someone who has taught in our system for 20 years. I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's a really an escalating cost that we are not going to be getting any direct benefit
Right.
for the kids today in the curriculum and everything else, but we're going to be paying that.
And so there are 9 teachers currently who are anywhere near qualifying for that. And so, you know, looking at that as a group, they make an average of $72,000. And the net between what we would hire, I mean, we tend to hire, let's say we hire in our sweet spot, we'd love to hire someone with a master's and 6 years' experience. I think that would be $45,000. There is breakage even with the $15,000. Pay will increase, or pay doesn't increase at 17.9% GMR. So your point about healthcare costs increasing potentially faster than that savings for salary is understood. There are other longevity costs that we don't pay in other districts. Each year, somebody who's worked in the district gets $2,500 on top of everything else just because they've been in the district over 10 years, over 15 years, over 20 years. So there are some things that we don't do in this contract that other districts do, but I understand your point.
Yeah. Because like the healthcare costs today, I don't know, I was trying to look at it like if a new hire, if it's around $38,000 to $40,000, and when you add in their healthcare benefit, the contribution to the state retirement system and FICA and dental, it looks like the benefit package with the salary, instead of 40, it's about 72,000.
Yep,
Is that an accurate number?
yep.
Okay.
So just a point of clarification on
Yeah.
the language there.
Yeah.
It may be moot, but,
Yeah.
Chris and I were just looking at it. So just the provision in there, I was like, I knew we weren't providing plans for retirees,
Okay.
but the key provision there is the value of the plan. And the intention, I believe, historically for that has been to ease sort of that transition into retirement, particularly if it's early, to bridge the gap between buying insurance on the open market
Right.
and getting into sort of like the Medicare wraparound plans that have existed for some time, obviously.
Yeah.
So I forget, the cap on it is, I think, $4,000 or something along those lines.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's a value up to $4,000 or 50% of the plan, and that typically gets conveyed to us when we consider early retirements for approval at the board in sort of the lump sum, payout for the retirement. Those are all figures that are baked in. We don't have like a lingering tail associated with those particular items. What I will then say is that I believe those early retirees, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, are eligible for COBRA at that point, but they're paying for that. They're
Yeah,
paying
yeah,
for that
it'd be more,
benefit,
yeah.
you know. And so that's where we might see non-employees show up somewhere, is that they are in the COBRA ranks for kind of our COBRA roles for what we've got going on. Okay, but they're essentially paying for it post early retirement. You know, they've gotten that lump sum and they're using those funds ostensibly to pay for it. Okay. Cool.
It does make an assumption that those 9 people would want to do early retirement. We have a lot of people who are working well into their 60s, so, and beyond.
And if you, in order for them to take this 2 spots a year, the school board has to approve the retirement, correct?
They have to approve the retirement, but it does say the board will approve up to 2. So there is the 2.
But I mean, there's, at any point, like, the board could say no if we got to like year 6 and we had like, what would that be, that 10 that had already retired and that we're getting, and then you had 2 more?
So the contract gets renegotiated, if this contract passes, the 2-year contract, the notice to retire for the first year of this contract has already passed, so we would have none, we have no liability for that for year 1. Year 2, we have the liability of $2 of the $30,000 for the 2 plans for that year. So they would submit in November that their intent, or that they would like to do early retirement and go through that process. The board would grant it, and then the contract is getting renegotiated.
No, I get that. I was just saying, like, if it got renegotiated and it went through and say it was year 5 or 6, even no matter what, like, can the board say no to a retirement?
If it's in the contract and it says the board will accept 2, they
Then
have to accept 2.
Okay, that's my question.
But it could get renegotiated, and it could say, something like, no one hired after.
Well, no, my question was just like, if you get to year 6 and this is still on the contract, could the board say no to 2 people? Because they're like, our liability is already too much, we
Guys,
need to take a year break.
I can't hear 2 conversations, I'm sorry.
We could do something like, no one hired after 2000 is eligible for this, and you can phase it out that way. Or not, I mean, depending how the negotiation goes, but it's a negotiation, so it's a back and forth.
And just so we're clear, generally,
You know, if we're squarely in the space of talking about early retirement here, the cost of an early retirement is generally offset by the savings in wages within the next 2 years of whoever is replaced, right? You know, so the incentive, if you will, for having that early retirement that's there allows for us to bring, sort of a lower end of the salary grid into existence within a district. And to your point, yes, we can certainly negotiate in or out certain features within that benefit range, but we have to consider it sort of as an isolated benefit or an isolated incentive to have some control over shifting expensive wage costs and other things out of the grid and the staff, and then replacing it with more novice staff. When I say that, I don't want to assume that we're replacing a 25-year teacher with a first-year teacher. There is a sweet spot. We were actually just talking about this during our public hearing. There is a sweet spot where we actually look to replace and still save some money when we do an early retirement like that.
And I get all that. My question was more of like logistics wise. When a teacher comes to retire, like, can the school board say no? That
Yes.
was really what I was just curious.
100%, and we have
Okay.
said no before, and
Okay.
typically when we can't afford to do it in that fiscal year.
So the language of different contracts are different, and so in
Yes, fair
some
point, yes.
contracts, you have to, like it says, the board will approve up to 2, or it's the board will approve 2. And they don't have to go more than 2. So the Henniker contract is slightly different than the Stark contract, and is different than the Ware contract.
And does the war contract say up to 2 or 2?
It says 2.
No, I think it says.
It says 2.
It might say up to 2, but I know when you get into if 3 applied, you get to determine which
Yes.
2.
Yeah.
I did see that language. Yeah.
So does that mean that every single year they have to have 2 people?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't say up to 2, it says
Up to
2.
2.
So it's
If
saying
If 2 people
If 2 people apply, then.
they're going to approve those 2.
They
If
have
4
to
people
grant-
apply, then they're going to
cut 2, they're gonna only.
say,
they're gonna
okay,
cap
that's
it
what I'm
at-
asking.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
That it says that if 2 people apply and only 2 people apply, then they're going to get retirement.
Correct.
Okay, the way that the where is. Okay.
Chris Roy, business manager at the SAU. Just a quick addition. I just looked it up. There's currently one person in that 5-year range at John Stark that's getting that $4,000 payment. So just a quick
The scope of it.
scope and what's in our budget.
Okay.
All right. So that's the teacher's contract. And then the support staff was all about our hourly wage and salary. So the first year of the contract is $100,864. That represents a lot of fixing of the grid and the hourly wages. The second year is $25,850. And so we've leveled it out. It's the $25,000 increase. So our currently hourly wage for the support staff contract, the support staff contract at John Stark is different from the support staff contract in Ware. It includes the custodians, the secretaries, the food service, because we do our food service in-house, as well as the paraeducators. And so the current average rate is $17.49. Projected increase, the average hourly rate would be $19.04, and then for 23-24 it would be $19.42 if everyone stays with us. Year one increase for the food service and custodians, we did a little bit more of an increase for those folks, is about a 13% average increase. And for office staff and paras, it's an 8% average increase for year one. Year two, it's a 2% average increase. And I mean, that was really it for the support staff contract.
So Jackie, on the surface, those percentages, I realize it's not talking about a lot of money, but it's a higher percentage. You said it's a fix. Can you elaborate on that? Meaning they haven't had raises in so long.
They were low. I mean, we're out of whack with who we're competing with. If you look at the grid and look at those salaries, hiring custodians, we are on the verge of not being able to run school many days because we've had open positions for custodians. Same is true, our food service, and it's just hard to hire. We're competing with the Target, and some of our support staff actually work 2 jobs, but
I just wanted to make sure it was,
Yep.
kind of public.
Yep.
Someone hears 13%, they're like, whoa, it's
Right.
13%. It's not.
right, it's an increase from $17.50 to $19.
So, to more reasonable wages. Thank you.
It does
Nope,
in
I'm
the
sorry.
start contract, the $15 becomes the starting for somebody brand new.
Which is what Starbucks pays. Bill?
Jackie, just comparing apples and apples with where the support staff contract at Ware, it looks like those numbers are lower, even when brought up under the contract. Do you have a problem right now with these people wanting to work over there? To some extent?
There's some extent, we have some,
I mean, is the problem worse, I would assume it's worse here than it is at Stark because of the pay scale with the support staff.
I don't see a lot of people going from Ware to Stark for that reason. Some people go because their kids have moved to the high school, or the students they've been working with have moved to
Well, they'd rather work with, would rather work with a younger group
Right.
than high school kids,
Right.
maybe. Okay, so that
Right.
hasn't been a problem.
We haven't seen a lot, and even between Henniker, I haven't seen a lot of shifting between the 3 districts.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll lose somebody, to another school district, another SAU entirely, but more often it's, I'm gonna go get a job somewhere else out of education.
Ever Stark? Everybody good?
Okay, so the Ware teachers, the WEAA contract, the first year is an estimated increase of $244,273, and the second year is $322,433. 2-year contract versus 3-year contract with Stark. 5% increase for each. That's both an increase between the year 1 grid and the year 2 grid, and the increase as people move up from 1 year experience, 2 years experience, 3 years. So it's a 5% increase each year. Average, that in dollars, year 1, it's an average increase of $2,700, and in year 2, $2,600. Starting salary right now is $38,600. Year 1, it would be $39,500, and year 2, it would be $40,000. Our current average salary in Ware is $50,400. Year 1, if everyone stays, it'd be $53,000, and in year 2, it'd be $55,800. Again, I draw your attention to the spreadsheet I shared that shows where teachers fall, and I'd like not to advertise this spreadsheet if they went to other neighboring districts. And so it is, I have had some questions about why in the negotiations there wasn't more of a focus on the beginning part of the contract, the new teachers, because we are hiring a lot of new teachers. And it's because we're behind at all stages, at all levels of the contract, of the grid. And we are losing people in years 5, 7, 9. And those are folks that, I don't know, 5, 10, when I was teaching, once you had 10 years experience, you really couldn't go somewhere else because you were too expensive. And that's not the case anymore. Where we're living. And so we do need, we had people say, I don't want to leave, but I have to for my family because it's this much more of a raise. So that is why it was more, and actually 2 contracts ago, the negotiation team actually they collapsed the first part of the contract to bring up that starting salary. And our starting salary is lower, but it's not as much lower if you look across the board, there's a few $1,000s difference versus 5, 6, 7 plus thousand at the other points in the grid.
Jackie, I was going to ask, and it's a lot of numbers, but it almost looks like it's disproportionate when you look at other towns, whereas, we're not that far off from the average at a starting salary.
Right.
But when you get higher up in the experience, it's profound differences. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, across the board, how does that happen? Is it just better contracts? Is it the towns? I mean, because my concern is, if this is voted in, we'll now get, a starting, which you seem to have a lot of young teachers, above average, which might attract them. But there's very well a disconnect once they get into that 5, it was a 6 years experience, where it's profoundly different from other towns.
So we knew coming with a contract that made ground wasn't going to pass. And I think the teachers came to the table knowing that, and certainly as the negotiation team, we knew that. So the Stark contract, because all of those folks, or at least half of them, are renegotiating their contracts right now. So that's what it is right now. That's not where it's going to be. They're going through this process right now like we are. And so I assume there'll be increases to all of those grids also.
So the likeliness is you're going to continue to attract younger teachers because you're a little bit above the average.
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood.
And hopefully keep those folks that we do have. And so to speak to the profile of the Ware teacher, right now, 60% of our teachers have an experienced educator certification. That's the 5 years experience. Having been, you have to have been in a district for at least 3 years, have 5 years experience, and then the superintendent can sign off and you can get your experienced educator certification. The state average is 86%, and we're at 60%. Classes taught by educators certified in the subject area, the state average is 90, we're at 82%. We're working with a lot of folks to do alternative certifications. They're career changers, or they don't quite have all the requirements, and Natasha works with them with the state on a plan. We get a lot of great teachers from that, but it's an investment on our part. So that's the salary and the reason for the focus on salary. Healthcare, we decreased the district contribution to the deductible, the HSA, from 100% to 50%. We're incentivizing. Ware actually has two different plans. Stark only has one. So Ware has a high deductible HSA plan and then a regular AB, Anthem Blue Cross SOS site of service plan? Okay. So they have choices. We want to incentivize the high deductible plan, and so it did that. So the district will pay 95% of the premium for the high deductible plan, and only 80% of the premium for the Access Blue premium. Also eliminating the wellness program and the healthcare benefit that we talked about for retirees. Some non-financial things that also happened in this contract. We removed the evaluation system, which is articulated currently in the contract. That's going to move out, if this passes, that's going to move outside of the collective bargaining agreement. And a committee is going to develop a different, it allows for more nimbleness with our evaluation plan, and I think collaboration around what that looks like. We're also, it provides, and this is at our discretion if we can envision using grant funds for this, but up to 5 paid days of professional development for teachers in their first 2 years of the district, in the district. So it helps us with those new folks that will have 5 days each year to do what we need, a boot camp or what we need to do. That doesn't have a local budget impact. We'd use grant funds for that. But it does, it does allow us some focus time for some training. So that's the WEA contract.
Is that in-house training, like workshops on site with the group as a whole?
Yes.
Bill?
Jackie, people, I think it's in there, but if I recall, people who are off the grid,
Yes.
they get a 5% as well, which I think under the, the contract you talked about 2 years ago where it was kind of front-end loaded.
Yes.
I think the people who were off-grid, they got like a stipend of $1,000 or something. It wasn't a 5%, but the higher you get, I think 5% becomes a lot more of a hike than what the people at the lower level are getting. 5% of a bigger number is a bigger number, so.
Right, it's about $2,500
Yeah.
for our folks off the grid,
Okay.
average.
Yeah. And the only other thing, if the enrollment, not the enrollment comparisons, the chart that you provided that said how many people were leaving, if I'm correct, in 18 and 19, you had 24 and 16 teachers left, is what the number I picked up off here. Or you hired 24 and 16, I'm assuming you had potentially
Right.
40 out, 40 in. But the last 2 years, it was 10 and 13, which is almost cut in half, so.
Last year, we didn't have, there was almost no movement statewide with COVID.
So that's that could be an anomaly.
That is definitely an anomaly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the year before, though, was 10, so.
That's what I mean, actually,
10?
the year 20 going into
So
2021.
you're saying 10 and 13, those two years kind of are, we don't know
don't
what
know.
to read out of that.
We
Okay. Okay.
Jackie, what percentage?
Liz, Would you mind? Sorry, that one probably better.
What percentage of your staff lives and where? Or of the staff overall, do you know?
I don't know the answer to that.
Thinking about commuting and competition between towns.
Yeah. I think we have a lot of people who do, I mean, who live in town. Their kids go to school here but the young ones either live with their folks or you live Concord or Manchester. But I have not done that analysis.
Thank you.
Depending on what side of town, it could still be considered a commute.
What we put on the list are actual like neighbors, commutable, and we've been using most of those for years as comparisons. I have a broader list, the picture's the same.
Any other questions?
And then the where support staff, again, it's just salary or wages, and so it's a one-year contract. It is $90,150. Our current average hourly rate, and this is just para-educators, our custodians and secretaries are not part of the bargaining agreement, which is actually part of what the wage pool represents in the proposed budget. This would increase the projected 22-23 hourly rate would be $15.25. It would raise the starting pay for a para 2, and a para 2 is a certification. It's a relatively small, easy to get certification, where we want people to have that certification, but it raises that starting pay from $13.47 to $14.91. It adds, there are some meetings we wanted our paraeducators to go to, so it adds 3 extra hours to their month. And so we added that goes into the cost of the contract. The paraeducators do not receive New Hampshire retirement and are not eligible for health insurance. There's a small, I believe it's $500.
What was it again? Sorry.
The healthcare supplement or benefit that the where, I can look that up in a second. That's not new to this contract. It's been in the contract for a couple contracts, but
Oh, yes, 500.
500. But we don't provide healthcare. So, any questions about that one?
I think we're good.
Did I miss anything? Okay.
Can I ask, can we go back to Article 4? I just had a question. So on John Stark, we're shifting employees' contribution to healthcare from the premium to the deductible. So we're going and we're telling the teachers that now they're gonna have to pay for the deductible so they make better choices. But in where we pay for the deductible, is there a reason for the difference in the two contracts?
Well, there's lots of separate negotiations that have happened through the years, is the short answer. In Stark, teachers paid 80%, no, the district paid 80% of the premium and fully funded the deductible.
Okay,
And so to make that work from a negotiation standpoint, this made sense. The district takes the premium. By the end of this contract, the employee takes the full deductible.
okay,
And there's a phase out of that. In where it was they paid 80, the district pays 85% of the premium. Thrown into it is the more expensive premium-wise A/B plan. And so those factors, and actually there are a number of people on that more expensive plan, and so incentivizing people to move to the HSA plan, which I actually think the numbers bear out, that will save them money also.
Most of the time,
but-
yeah. Okay,
But, so they're just different contracts.
okay. And is the SAU still keeping at the 85% of the premium they're paying?
For the AB plan, it would be 80% of the premium.
That's the
And-
deductible, the 80%, but I'm talking about the premium.
So in the new contract, for the site of service plan or the HMO plan, the district would pay 80% rather than 85.
Of the deductible of the premium, the premium?
There's no deductible for that plan.
Okay, that's where I wrote down,
And
okay.
then the high deductible plan, there's no deductible for that plan. It's a co-insurance, model. So for the high deductible plan, it's a
Yep.
$5,000 deductible. The district will pay half of the deductible. Currently, we pay the full deductible. So
Okay.
it's a decrease in the amount of deductible, and an increase will go from paying 85% of the premium to 95% of the premium.
Okay, maybe I misheard you the other, last time, because I wrote, but they were both deductibles. Okay, that makes much more sense now, because compared to what I wrote, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. Okay,
By the end of the contract, there is healthcare savings in both contracts. It's not a ton, but it is healthcare savings for the districts. But we were looking to break even, but shift that deductible.
I got you, okay.
Any other questions?
All right?
I don't
I'll be
see
in-
any. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or business for the SAU while they're here? Random last thoughts?
We're still at the kindergarten.
Oh, I'm sorry, I knew I missed something. I told Megan before the meeting, I know I'm gonna miss something, please make sure you cover for me. Thank you.
Almost got out.
Sorry.
Natasha Colmine, Assistant Superintendent. So do you want me to start with just kind of like a brief recap? Or do you just want to launch right into questions?
You guys tell me does everybody want a brief recap, and then you can ask your questions?
I mean, you did a great presentation. I'm concerned about major changes or any shifts or highlights or things that you might wanna reinforce. Mostly, that's me personally, but you guys.
No, I think Natasha's presented
Yeah.
with the best foot forward as far as a full-day kindergarten program that's very marketable. I just have I've said this before, I just have my own reservations in the long term,
Sure.
that this presents a best-case scenario of getting 100 students, 5 classrooms. I'm concerned that if we had less, like you said, 85, well, maybe we could still go with 4 classrooms and save money and not be down to where it's a break-even point. But my concern with that is if the program gets approved, I look at what's happened with staffing the last 4 or 5 years of class reductions, class size reductions, and somewhat of a reluctance to cut one classroom out of a grade, grades 1 through 4. And I think, based on that history, I would expect that the district would still say, we got 85, we're gonna, now that the program's full day, I think we'll go with the 5 classrooms because we like smaller ratios of student to teacher. And I accept that. I accept that smaller classrooms, I think has a better learning environment. I understand that. I think that's fine. But in the long run, I think that when we talked about escalating costs, people costs are my first concern.
Sure.
If we add teachers, right now it may look, we're gonna get this full benefit of 100, the more we get that we can fit perfectly in a classroom, the better it looks. But as we go 5, 10 years out, those personnel costs and health care and benefits associated with same, are going to far outpace the other savings, contract services or bus service, which are not going to go up as high. So I think in the long term, I still have concerns. I have concerns over space because this, I think, will be a nice, perfect fit for Center Woods classrooms that are available now, but if things change, where do we go from here? Whereas right now, we do have flexibility. And if you, the only other thing with kindergarten, I don't think I brought up, there's not going to be no half-day option, I assume.
Correct.
And if you had, not that it will happen, but what if you had 120 people wanting to go kindergarten next year? Are you going to cap it, do you think? Or
We can't cap it. We,
you have to?
we have to, if we offer it, we have to, if we build
Okay.
it, and they come, we have to
All
find
right.
a space for them.
All right.
That would be a pretty significant bubble,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
which
yeah, no, I just
we're
threw-
having
I
lots
just-
of
I just threw it- I just
conversations,
threw a number out there. I
about
don't-
declining enrollment. I will say that one of the things that I think we want to kind of remember in this shift from a half-day program to a full-day program is the shift from spending money on busing, that midday bus run, which, yes, not like, probably not accelerating each year as quickly as personnel or health insurance costs do. But it is, the question in my mind is that how you want to be spending your money? In terms of you're devoting, at this point, $70,000 to a midday bus run versus spending $70,000 on educating students. And so I think that's one kind of philosophical question we want to ponder in all of this. I think the other thing, and Chris pointed it out, and he understands how this works better than I do, but as per pupil kind of costs and everything go up, so does adequacy follows in that. So as we start to see some of those personnel-related expenses increase, the state increases adequacy in some wonderful formula that I don't understand that is driving that. So and in shifting from a full-day program from a half-day program to a full-day program and receiving that full adequacy for each student, you're essentially moving the cost of educating those kindergarten students away from the local tax base to the state tax base, because now you're getting the full adequacy for them. So you're absolutely right that there's a lot of unknowns in terms of Centerwood's space in general, which is why we have a committee specifically looking at that in terms of what do we need to do with that building in the next few years, because there's other things that are all coming into play. And your very valid point about what's the point at which declining enrollment actually has an impact on staffing? And I mean, I think Dr. Coe's spoken to this, and so in some way I'm repeating, but a few kids in each grade doesn't actually change how many classes we need. There's a tipping point in where we have to see a significant amount of enrollment reduction, evenly spaced across all grades or focused in one grade. Then we can start to say, oh, we don't need a fifth, fourth grade teacher next year, because all of a sudden all the kids who aren't coming are all fourth graders. But the reality is, in most cases, it's sporadic, and it takes a long time to actually realize not needing a teacher at a particular grade level. I mean, I'll just share one quick story. At a previous school district I was in, in one summer, we had 12 third graders enroll. And it was because the local private school closed. And so that's very unusual, and we had to pivot, and that's what we do. We pivot if we need to. If we had 100 kindergarten students all of a sudden, and we had only planned for, the 80 and hired 4 teachers, we'd pivot. And that's what we would do, and then we would come back and correct in the next year.
The only thing, I understand from year to year, but when I go back to 17, 18, and the numbers you provided are good, but, and you go to 21, 22, like in the first grade, you went from 127, you're at 78 today. That's a drop of 22 and 27. That's 49 kids. And second grade, 109 to 88. Third grade, 121 to 95. Fourth grade, 114 to 80. And fifth grade is actually 102 to 116. It's a little bit of a bubble there. But I look and I say, in grades 1 through 4, there's potential to drop a class over a longer period of 4 years. And if I took four classrooms and cut them, that's staffing of potentially 8 people, 4 teachers, maybe 4 paras, and you go 4 times 72,000, and that.
Dr. Coe's done all of that analysis.
Suddenly I'm up to a plow truck for the town every year. You know, and your answer was, you're navigating this, and I understand that, but, you know, when I was in the Coast Guard, I was navigating at sea, and when I got fog, I made a course change.
I can wait.
I didn't keep plowing ahead saying, well, I don't know, not enough data yet. I'm just throwing it out there because we want to see, and it affects your budget.
Yep.
And when you budget, like, and I know Zach talked about, they have more flexibility with teachers at the high school because they teach certain classes and you're going to drop that class. But here I'm saying, you're still dropping to where you could make, cut classes, cut people, and maybe it's because you're saying, I don't know if this enters into it, but you say, gee, I got a great teacher here. If I cut a class now, she may be the one that's odd man out, and I don't want to lose her. And there may be some of that, trying to keep the balance, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, and because of our turnover, we could phase out without letting somebody go, right? There'd be enough people leaving or that we could not hire a position.
Yeah.
And we'd shift.
Move somebody if
Yep, yep.
their qualifications and all that, yeah.
And the COVID, contending with COVID really has truly for the last 2 years, it is hard when every day we're trying to staff our building. And so the idea of cutting at this point is just really hard to grapple with. Not in those numbers, some of that is real, absolutely. And we definitely have declining enrollment. I don't know if those numbers are the right numbers.
Those are the ones you gave me.
Yeah, they're the right numbers. They're the numbers. They're the kids in our school. But
That's why I.
no. And but
The analysis.
what's going to happen next year? And so it is hard to come forward with a budget that cuts when I'm subbing and Natasha's like that. We're just trying to make every day happen and to keep the room staffed. So
Okay.
it's just, that is a layer, that is a factor. Maybe we should have done more going into this budget, but with that as the overlay of everything we've done for the last 2 years, it was hard.
All right.
Can I just make one point? I know Tom has a question
And we
here,
did
but,
cut a position.
and we can, I think most of this is for debate, but Bill, you're taking the very top of the bubble. And that is the most extreme circumstance. And so to a certain extent, I'm not sure it's 100% fair to the SAU, because if you look at the averages, they're in the 90s, the 92s and the 95s, the 5 and 10-year averages. And the 127 is, I look at all these numbers, it's such a profound blip compared to everything else. I'm not sure that that's fair. I look at years where there's 102, 107, 102, 96, and then 82 and 99, 82. And 78, when we know for a fact there are some parents that still kept their kids home from school because of COVID. I'm just not sure that 78, to Jackie's point, if that's the right number based on COVID. And am I misinterpreting the data? I mean, 127 is a huge blip. I mean, that's 25% in 1 year, and then it goes back down substantially, but then comes back up to the 99. So it goes 82, 99, 82. It's from their spreadsheet. I'm looking right at it. 127 is the highest number. It's the worst possible scenario. So I want to be fair to the SAU, unless I'm misinterpreting what I'm seeing here.
But the current trend is going down, the current enrollment trend. So wanting to acknowledge that. It is not at the middle school. The middle school enrollment has stayed pretty steady.
It has.
Which
It has.
speaks
No, I recognize
to, I don't know if folks move to where and, when their kids are a little bit older and move in, if that's what's happening. And we do, from where class size, where we think lower class size has more impact is in first grade, second grade. So we have made some conscious choices about particularly first grade and second grade. There's projected 80 students for fifth grade next year. That is a dip that is out of whack with the rest of, and I don't know if that's, I don't know where that comes from. And so, yeah, yes, it's an issue.
Is the,
Megan, I'm sorry.
no, you're fine.
Tom had a
Tom was
question.
next,
He's
you're
been
right.
super patiently waiting.
No, that's okay. They're probably short answers. What was the date that requirement for midday transportation went into effect? Is this the first year or the second year of that?
Second year.
I believe 2019 is when we started talking about, we weren't going to talk about kindergarten on the warrant, and we did because of that.
And last year was the skip year, right? You guys didn't talk about it at all.
We didn't talk about it.
Right.
So it was 2019 when that went into effect.
Right.
Second question is a straightforward one. How many school districts in the state? Do you know that off the top of your head? I thought I could just find that easily on the
How many
website.
total or how many have
To-
kindergarten?
Total.
There, I don't know
School
how many school
districts.
districts, but there are 105
105, yeah,
SAUs.
It's really hard to measure, actually.
No, okay, yeah, that's why I had.
Some are
had-
KA,
What I
some are
did find, though, just is they do list all of the districts that have full-day kindergarten. It's something like 144 or 147 districts in the state that have full-day programs, and that includes charter school districts as well. On a different site, I found 167 for total number of school districts. But it wasn't the state education site, so I didn't know if that was an accurate number.
That would be way too low.
At
too low.
one point when we were doing this kindergarten research in, I think it was, 2018, 2019, there were, I think, 10 school,
I think Patty's
Districts
less
that-
than 6 at this point.
there are less than 6 school districts that don't have full-day
have, okay.
kindergarten.
The other question that I have is related to the space. It says you're able to do this because of space that is freed up. Could you explain what it is that freed up that space and how it ties in with the waiver for the size of the classrooms?
Sure. Some of it has to do with students who've had some extreme needs in the last few years who have moved up to the Ware Middle School building. So students who have intense physical needs and might be spending a good part of their day having some physical therapy, occupational therapy, or students who have significant emotional needs who need a separate space. And so we've seen some shift in that population up to the middle school, so that's freed up some spaces that can now be condensed. So for example, it might be that space was being used with 1 or 2 students fairly regularly throughout the day, and now that teacher is, we could actually put that teacher in with another teacher, share a classroom, have some students in that space together, and that kind of domino shift of moving people around is going to allow for us to free up some classroom size spaces.
So it's a shift in special education population, not in the regular classroom
Correct.
population. And so that's also why you needed a waiver, because these are smaller spaces that would be used.
We don't actually technically need a waiver. I originally called the Department of Ed to request a waiver, at which point I was told that because we were not talking about new construction, we were talking about using existing space, there was actually no need for a waiver. And Mr. Kirk had helped us through that process.
I think so. Thank you.
Sure. All right.
You had a question, did you get it answered?
No, well, one of the questions I did. So the Centerwood space is just due to the special eds movement? It's not gonna be like multiple kids being put into a space that may inhibit their education?
No, this population has shifted to the other building.
Okay. And I had asked the homeschool intent, like the 30, so last year was 31 and this year was 18. Do we know how much, because I know that when you do homeschool intent, correct me if I'm wrong, that you just have to do it the first year and you never have to say anything again, right?
Correct.
So is it
cumulative.
possible that this 31 and the 18 is combined and all those 31 kids are still homeschooled? and they may come
Is the
back to the
number the
district?
31 requests we got last year?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so if those, oh, sorry.
That homeschool, that number on the enrollment sheet
Yes.
is new intents.
That's what I'm asking. So,
Only.
so
And
that's what I'm saying. So the 31 kids from last year plus 81 kids from this year.
It could be,
So
yeah,
that's almost 50 students.
And there are some,
Said 81.
18, sorry.
I know what you mean.
there are some people who re-enroll, there are some people who move.
But we don't know what of that 31 is still homeschooling.
Correct.
Okay. Or what, who is,
they either came back to our schools and they're reflected in our enrollments, which we didn't see a lot of, or if they move to another school district, they are not obligated to tell us. If they enroll in a private school, they're not obligated to tell us. They're not obligated to tell us when they come off of a homeschool rank unless they come back to us specifically and we enroll them. We never see them again.
so of that 31, you said there was only a couple who came back? So we just don't know how many?
I know of one, I think for sure, at Henniker Community School who re-enrolled.
But that's not where. Okay.
You're right.
Okay. And if someone moves into town and they're homeschooling their child, they have to give you an intent to homeschool once they moved into town, correct?
They are supposed to, but there's no way for us to assure that that gets done.
Okay.
It's whether or not they choose to follow the law.
Okay. It's just, because I know people who are homeschooling and like, it's like when they come back, like, what are these numbers gonna look like? I don't know.
They can also go on to the Virtual Learning Academy, which is a completely online public charter school in New Hampshire.
And they don't have to do the intent.
No, we don't, if they go from us to homeschool to another public school, there's no way for us to know that that's happened.
And if they go from you to the online state academy, do they have to tell you? Okay.
Directly from us to the.
Directly,
academy.
yes, sorry.
Yes, that's like they're transferring schools.
But, okay, but that's not within this homeschool intent, because those kids are still in our town, so they could come back.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, or they could have left and we wouldn't know. Yeah, the tracking is problematic.
That explains how it's hard to know.
I know, right? That's
Oh,
why I
boy.
was like, it was my question, because like I made the comment to my husband, I was like, we know of at least like 5 kids. They're still here, and my kids are only in 2 grades.
It used to be, prior to the change in the legislation, that they had to notify us every year of their intent to continue homeschooling, and that's not the case anymore.
Okay.
The law changed like 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions for Natasha?
All right, thank you.
That's it for school.
Thank you. Once again to the SAU, thank you so much. Appreciate the detailed answers. I think this year, compared to last year, went so much better, having to be able to meet in person, so.
The one question would be, all their answers to our questions, do we get a definite that no one had any more questions on that?
I didn't see any, but we can throw it out
Just
there.
want to make sure before.
I thought Bill was kind of nodding, he was all set, but
I'm all set. I thought they answered, they answered all the questions I had.
I don't get work emails like that have links directly to a website. And I'm just saying, Liz, yeah, go right ahead.
Now, do I take off my mask if I'm at the podium? Yeah.
Whatever you're comfortable with, so we can hear you.
So my question is for Dr. Coe. What amount is invested in public safety for our students with regard to social and emotional traumas? I would like to cite Mr. Patrick Hill's appearance in front of the board with the incident with regard to his daughter. As a parent, I think about my daughter, and if something happened and kind of the academic achievement that gets hindered in children's trauma, particularly girls. So I'm not an advocate for expulsion of children. However, I don't know what part of the budget goes into that counseling for children that are, when you see parents, and that's why I'm getting emotional when you see other parents that are like lost in words. And I don't know Patrick Hill, but I heard him and I, felt his presence in terms of what occurred to his daughter. So as a tax-paying citizen and as a parent and as a member of the Finance Committee, I'm just curious to know how that evolves and just thinking about that 50% reduction in deductible for healthcare, but then further the full, just complete elimination of the wellness. Is that contributing to perhaps lack of resources for teachers to be able to provide support for students or just, or perhaps is this perhaps some of that socio development challenges that were coming up from the elementary into the middle school? And so I just want to pose that because I don't want to overlook it as being not like a budget item or a finance, because as an economist and a financial professional, I do like to kind of rationalize that it usually does come down to the money.
That is not a question I necessarily was prepared for from the Finance Committee. It is something that the board is discussing, and I do think maybe that's the better venue for this, but, and I also would caution that there are 9 different sides of every story, especially when something's on Facebook.
Jackie, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
I totally feel from where Liz is coming from. I've been in that situation in this town multiple occasions with my daughters. But from the Finance Committee's perspective, she's talking about the money. I don't feel that you have to. I think it's out of order really to answer to that part of it, as much as I'm sure she would love it. But I am interested in if you have the numbers on if that's allocated in the budget. I think it's a fair question for her to ask, and if you have the ability to answer that, I think that would be great.
Well,
I just want to.
Yep, it's a much broader, it's the whole package. It's what experience are we putting together for our students? It comes down to the people we're able to hire and retain and keep to create those classroom environments to help students. It comes to, we've got a whole population of kids who have gone through COVID and all the ups and downs that deal with that and are coming back to school and are struggling. There are kids who are struggling at a time when we don't have a lot of resources and our absentee rate is a revolving door. And so, yes, there are issues that are coming up with that we are, Is there a budget number that goes with that? Yes, all of it, the whole budget. Do we buy a program for it? I don't know. I think it's culture, it's climate, it's something we have to develop and build and grow to make sure every kid feels safe in school. And that's what we're trying to put forward with our budget, with our contract, to be able to foster that. And so it is a complicated, and that's what I meant by that's a big question. And I don't have a simple answer.
I don't have the slides from Central Woods or in my car, but wasn't part of the CARES money that we're intending to get for next year, were we using part of that at Ware for some social and emotional things as well?
We do have a social emotional learning program that works with students who need additional support. It's a more intensive piece that we're using. I actually had wanted it as part of our actual budget, had pulled it from the budget in 2019, and then we've been using COVID funds to pay for it.
Okay.
Had some hiring issues with that. But now we're getting up and running. Some people have advocated for an SRO. That has gone as part of the solution to what you talked about and what you referenced. That has not been something that has gained a lot of traction. I don't know that that's the answer or not, but it's a big conversation.
Liz, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It does, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ask one more time.
Yeah, of Jackie? Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Before she goes out there. It's a minor one, but if, depending on how the voters vote, you'll either have, even with a default, you'll still have a percentage increase, but it would be less on a default budget.
Yes.
If you do have ESSER funding, it's restricted on how it can be spent,
Yeah.
but you still have some that you can spend. Is there any likelihood that if you get caught short with a default budget in some of your areas, that some of that funding could be used to, say, put a bigger pile into the technology pot, even though you'd like to keep that at a level which is uniform moving forward for planning purposes
Yeah.
for budgets? But are you kind of gaming that out to say, we've still got this nest egg here that has restrictions on how it can be spent, but it might be able to backfill some shortfalls?
Right. We cannot supplant the budget. We can
Okay.
supplement the budget and so if there is supplement needed, we can access those funds.
Well, if your default budget is short,
Yep,
then you are supplementing, are you not, in some of those categories?
in some of the categories. Yep, we have to approve it.
Okay,
But,
okay,
yes.
all right.
Thank you. All good. That's why they're here.
Yeah, no.
Go around the room.
Good.
Last chance.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We'll look forward to a deliberative session. Hopefully in person this,
Yeah.
I mean, I was there, but not many other people were there.
Bill, I love your interpretive dance. Yeah, this looks like, yeah, we'll keep that level moving forward.
My wife always says I talk with my hands. I'm not Italian, but I talk with my hands all the time.
Well, and I think,
My father
I
used to
think the
do that.
discussion had been that we weren't gonna go into
That's what I'm getting in the
deliberative
eye.
until we
or
had
the-
some away
We did.
and think about it.
So we're just talking about how we went around on the night and deliberations. I don't want to disrupt you guys, but
No, oh,
I
sure.
think what we're talking about is, Megan just reminded me, what we discussed was having some time to absorb the information even that was shared tonight before we go into deliberations of the warrant articles. And
And I was
I
gonna work
thi-
on
I-
that
I
tax
think-
impact spreadsheet, and I think that, for myself, that helps.
Yeah.
so I think that's a good idea, and I know I always ask to collaborate, but I want to do what everybody's in favor of. I think that makes sense. Is anybody that really has an objection or was expecting to go into voting tonight?
No, I don't want to go into voting tonight.
Yeah, I'm not real comfortable with it, so
No, no.
Waiting.
I think that we do. So let's stay on the SAU at this point. You're working on that tax sheet that you
Yes,
so
but I was
kindly
gonna
did last
ask
year?
Naomi, because we haven't gotten like the warrant articles, like we have like little pieces of paper that we got, but I don't think we've actually gotten like the sheet like we get with the actual warrant articles for me to take the numbers and everything off of. Like that was approved by the board. Okay, that's exactly what I was thinking, because I was like, I'm gonna do all this work and then it's gonna change.
We took one off, we added one.
Okay, if you could send me that in the morning, that would be great, and then I can work on that.
So relative to that, tomorrow night, and I'm jumping ahead. We're here at 7 o'clock. We're gonna continue our discussions, but at a minimal, Chief Vizino is gonna be here for everybody. He sent me a note and said he didn't feel like he adequately represented the warrant articles on the radio system, I forget what he called it. And I said, absolutely, that's what tomorrow was intended for. So he'll be coming in. What I don't know, and what we decided was, were we gonna ask anybody else to come back, or do we feel like we have what we need?
Well, it'd be up to a committee member if they wanted somebody else to come back.
Yeah, that's what I'm sorry, I was going around the room. I mean, do we need Benji to come in here, or do we?
No.
I don't.
I don't
okay.
think so.
I don't think so either. And then, I think the police stuff was pretty black and white as well.
So I sent an email just with some notes.
Can you go up to the note, Mike? Sorry.
Was that right beforehand?
Yes,
I didn't get a chance to read it, Liz, so if you
yes,
could summarize.
Yeah, absolutely. I had sent an email just because I had met with Joe and Matt from the DPW on the 6th.
Saw that, yeah.
Yes, the day after we met. I wasn't able to make the group meeting. It was on a Saturday, so I was with the kids. But they did show me the fleet of the trucks, and they shared with me that the lifespan of the truck is an average about 10 years, and that where DPW spent about $261,000 on repairs. But what struck me the most, based on their presentation and the time that I spent, was that I think it was about 42 vehicles that are being serviced by the DPW for the police station, and they're not being paid for that, or that there's no compensation for the service for the time and labor and materials only. And so with a staff of 4 covering the transfer station along with the sewer and other, I'm just concerned perhaps with regards to the allocation of resources and the timing. So I'm not sure. So those are the types of questions I have with regards to the budget, and then further on the police department with regards to the certification of Chief Moore, and if he is New Hampshire certified as a police officer. And I had a resident that had stated to me that he was not, and that he has been asked to be certified as a New Hampshire officer, and that he currently is not a certified New Hampshire. Oh, he is?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
the state, I have the standards and training upstairs. Yep,
Okay.
he passed. He passed the law package.
Oh, that's
So
great.
should we just say Naomi Bolton said that Chief is certified
So
as New
Naomi
Hampshire?
Bolton
What's that
confirmed
got
that
to do with the
Chief
finance?
Moore
Yeah, I was
is.
gonna say,
So
yeah.
the reason that I asked was based on the, or the reason I was shared was the roles and the duties based on a certified officer versus not, and the salary. And so my question was based on the salary ranges, was the salary appropriate for Chief Moore? Or are there other police staff that perhaps should be experiencing an increase in their salary? And further, what other training is available for the force, I guess, in terms of just community engagement that aren't so much using like guns and tasers? And then my third question was,
Liz, can I just stop for a second? Because you're starting to lose me,
Yeah.
and it's a lot. So let's just start, can we start at the DPW first, where she started? Do you want to have Benji come back in?
so if these questions, I guess, can be addressed, I don't know if he should.
Do you feel you could answer these questions tonight?
I would prefer the department head answer.
Okay, so then,
A lot of it
the
I
preference would be
prefer.
for that. So moving to the police,
And then maybe
before
he should come back,
I'm sorry?
maybe having them both come back.
Yeah, but Tom had a question first,
Well,
stopping at the police.
Yeah, it wasn't really a question as much as a comment, because when you talk about the pay, except for the chief, everybody is under a collective bargaining agreement. And so when you say certified or not certified, they're all either certified or they're in training because they're a brand-new person. And several of the new officers that have been hired as fully certified officers. So as far as the pay scale goes, he really can't tinker with that because it's a bargaining agreement. So uncertified maybe is the person who is in the academy or going through his or her 13 weeks of field training, but, and then there's a probationary period thereafter, I don't know, a year or 6 months, whatever it is, but it's all spelled out in the contract. It's not something that we can arbitrarily make changes on.
So I think what, Tom, are you saying basically we can't affect in the finance committee any of that because it's in the collective bargaining
It's
agreement?
part of the collective
So
bargaining
debating
agreement.
isn't gonna
Right,
matter
and
for
that's,
us?
I
Is that
think
what you're saying?
we're in the third year of a 3-year collective bargaining agreement, so whatever that spells out is what will end up in the budget as far as the expenditures. The chief, of course, is not under the collective bargaining agreement because he's a chief. It wouldn't work out too well if the chief was in the same union as his employees. But all of the others are, including, I believe, the lieutenant as well. He's still in it, who's the second in
Yeah, it's
command.
just the chief and the secretary's not.
Secretary's not.
So Liz, just to put some context to Tom's credibility, Tom has sat in on the collective bargaining agreement negotiations, neutral. So I don't want to say he's authority, but he knows more than most of us on it. So what I would say is if that answers your question or Naomi answers the questions, that we don't need to bring the chief in. But if you feel like he needs to be. That's,
He'd rather have you get the answers than rumor mill.
so,
The questions about like the training and stuff like that, that's not really for the finance
right,
committee.
which Tom just addressed. So what we're really talking about is just the chief at this
Okay.
point.
Right,
Which Naomi answered the question that he's certified. So does that resolve your concern?
Yes, that answers
Okay.
my question, and the second question that I had was just based on the ratio of his force that is town residents of Ware, similar to the question that I posed to the school district, and just thinking more about, and this is not finance related, but thinking more about community engagement and growth, and just having Ware residents front and center.
Here's the thing, I don't think it has much to do with the finance committee, but I know the chief would answer that question in a heartbeat. I don't know that I would drag him in just for that question.
I mean, you could just email him and ask him.
He's fantastic. If you send him an email, I guarantee he'll respond with, if he's available, within an hour. And I'd strongly encourage that. He's very, very easy with information. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's put everything right on the website.
Yeah, I mean,
Budget,
I,
he's put everything.
last time I emailed, he emailed me back in 20 minutes.
Great. And so the last update that I had was that I met with Hollis Wilson from the Ware Middle School for 15 minutes via Zoom yesterday.
Who's that?
She's a middle school teacher, and so she had presented at one of the last couple of board meetings on the community service program, and this was in connection to the lost revenue during recycling, just during COVID, plastics. It wasn't generating much revenue even based on 2019, but just having short staff on the DPW and then short staff in the Ware. My conversation with her brought forth the honors program at John Stark, and the autonomy that students are provided to focus on programs, and perhaps the ability to integrate some of these programs that are being incubated at the school with other public service works, and more thinking about past warrants. And I believe there was a warrant that was looking to bring a landfill into Ware. And so when we want to talk about perhaps connection in finance and sustainability, and this kind of came up in terms of just looking at sustainability and trying to maintain property values for the town of Ware, but then also thinking about services, and so tying it together, really being, can we have students that have autonomy through an honors program and teachers to work at perhaps the DPW, not work there, but
Liz,
have.
I'm sorry, but it's really outside the scope, completely outside the scope of what our mission is. As much as I'm sure there are people here that would love to have it, it's really so far outside of our scope. It doesn't mean I don't, I wouldn't support a green program, but that in no way, unless you're proposing a warrant article or something of that sort, and we could let Naomi comment further, but if you had a warrant article on recycling, things like that, and there was a cost, we would debate that, but I really think we need to keep within the constraints of what we're doing here as a finance committee.
Right, and I'm more thinking about the staffing and conversations that have come up with Joe, and kind of the bays already set up here in Ware for recycling, and other towns like Lebanon and Derry that have been able to bring in significant revenue to reduce the taxpayer burden on recyclables. And so just really thinking about long-term, well, it's not a warrant article, I'm not trying to bring forth one now, but just thinking.
I was just gonna ask, so confirmation from Naomi, it sounds like that would be a conversation Liz should be having with the Board of Selectmen. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Naomi's for the public. Naomi said yes.
A lot of we have mandatory recycling, but it's not 100%.
Yeah, so,
You can get everybody to throw their recyclables in recyclables. And then when the market, we hang on to our stuff because you have to pay to haul it. So when the market's up, we ship it. A lot of times we hold on to it.
yeah, I think and for the public, it's definitely a conversation with the Board of Selectmen. I do, I think there's plenty of taxpayers that would participate in it. It's just not in the scope of what we're doing here.
And you also, we're talking the next big probably change you'll see is we're gonna work on expanding the transfer station to do. We've been to a lot of facilities, and ours was built in the 80s, and it still looks like it's in the 80s. So, it's all spread out in a lot of places.
And I'm sure we'll see a warrant article on when they want to do the expansion.
Think about that infrastructure, sure.
Okay. So in terms of the town, we're good for tomorrow, and I think what we settled on is you would like to see Benji here? That was the last thing, okay. And then, I don't think we need to see anybody else here. I think we went around the room, we're all in agreement. Benji could come in for a few minutes, besides Chief Azino, which we said is coming. In terms of,
Do we want to start deliberation tomorrow night, or,
yeah, exactly what I
or
was thinking.
can we, I will ask
Well,
for
let's-
my own time frame,
Actually-
that I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get the tax impact thing done for tomorrow.
Can we actually, why don't we do this, if you don't mind?
Yep.
Let's just review what we have here. So tomorrow night, we're at 7. We talked about the 27th at 7 o'clock as well. And then also the 2nd, which we anticipated would be for writing blurbs.
Yep.
So if we're not ready to do it tomorrow, that, I think that, and you encouraged this, which is why we are keeping the 27th. So it sounds to me like you don't feel like you're comfortable for tomorrow.
I don't think, unless I don't do actual work tomorrow, which I can't not
Yeah,
do.
I'm with you.
I do get paid to do work. I have to actually do it. I don't think that I'm gonna get the tax impact by tomorrow. I just, especially with Naomi's not gonna send me the warrant articles until tomorrow morning. Like, I
You
have,
might get them tonight if you're lucky.
but I don't wanna do it at 10 o'clock.
So let's not put undue pressure on Megan, because we're.
Unless somebody wants to jump in and say they'll do it, like,
So I'm just thinking about how valuable that was for me in particular the last 2 years. I know Matt did the first year, so I think that makes a lot of sense. Tom, good.
Well, just, I would like to have as close as a full contingent of us here when we start deliberating, but we're missing 2 or 3 people tonight.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So that's,
I agree.
case in point, Gary is on vacation, which he did notify me, which means I'll double check, but he may very well be here for the 27th. And there's a good chance we will get Leah as well, which is to Tom's point,
that would
an
be,
added benefit.
to have everyone, that would be, because if we don't have everyone, then that means on the 27th, we could rehash everything and revote everything.
We need the
and
count
it's kind of,
for the mailer.
yeah.
Okay, so then tomorrow, I mean, we can have Fire, Benji, and if you guys want to have open discussion, we'll say discussion, not debate. That's a possibility, and maybe tomorrow's a short meeting.
And I'll get, and if I have like some of it done, then I'll send out what I have. I at least have the schools done, because that's simpler, but we'll go from there.
Okay, so, I have one other, is there any other business to discuss? Because I have one other item.
Tomorrow at 7?
Tomorrow at 7
Tomorrow,
o'clock.
7.
Okay, so, I'm gonna do a couple things here. I'm gonna read a letter, and then I'm gonna have Eileen come up and speak, and this letter's from Mr. Kirk, that was sent to all of us. I do have an envelope here with a copy for James and Bill. During our last meeting, Neil stepped out of the meeting to have a side conversation with both the fire chief and the police chief. There was a disruption, and Eileen went out in the hall with him, and I got a letter from Neil. I did send a note to the chief, both chiefs, and asked what the context of the discussions were. I don't want to get into an overall debate on this, but at the end of the day, we're a committee and having side conversations. We talked about this starting 2 years ago. I'm not in favor of it. I'm going to read the letter first, and then I'm going to get Eileen to come up and talk about what the attorney's opinion is on the situation. And then we can, if there's a discussion that needs to be had. So the letter Neil had sent January 6th, this is Neil Kirk, committee member. Dear Madam Moderator, this is to Eileen Meany. I respectfully request that you cease interfering with my duties as a member of the Ware Finance Committee. Last night, as I tried to have a private conversation in the anteroom with the fire chief after he addressed the committee, you joined us uninvited and effectively prevented our conversation from continuing. Your job as a town moderator does not include determining how a committee member performs his or her role. The town warrant article establishing the Finance Committee gives the town moderator 3 specific duties and no others. These are: appoint members, remove and replace members for the lack of attendance as a majority of the committee sees necessary, and appoint a temporary replacement for a member who seeks elective office and is thus disqualified from serving on a committee. That's it. Those are your only responsibilities as a town moderator. Hence, you as the town moderator are not the arbitrator of any committee member's behavior. Like every other committee, I am free to acquire information from anyone in any way I choose and to share or not share that information with the committee or anyone I choose. If you believe in any way, and if you believe I have in some way violated the town's code of ethics, you should bring charges against me in the appropriate forum. In the meantime, I will continue to perform my duties as a committee member. Yours truly, Neil M. Kirk, Ware Finance Committee. Eileen?
So there was an additional piece. I filed a 91A, which is a right to know, as a citizen in the town of Ware last week. And I believe, Tom, you sent out 91A to the other parties?
Yes, so I sent a note to both chiefs asking what the context of the conversation. Chief Moore, Police Chief Moore, responded that the context was a continuation of the conversation around staffing, and there was no other context to it. It implied that there was no further detailed discussion on that. And then I have the other one up here. Let's see, I will read the response to Chief Vizina because it was a little bit more information. Neil's question was a continuation of the discussion regarding the town's vulnerability to special assessments should fire join capital area mutual aid fire compact. I will attempt to provide that information to you and the committee in the near future. For what it's worth, I'm going to actually read this since we're on it. For what it's worth, I find the practice of sharing a podium with a committee member disruptive. Perhaps there should be an additional seating table set up to allow space for all members. And it is not signed. Chief is Robert Vizina, which is why we have an extra table.
Okay. So in regards to the reason why I filed a 91A, when I walked out into the lobby, what I overheard was a continuation of the content of this public meeting. So I filed a 91A, which is a right to know request, as a citizen in the town of Ware. What 91A says is that any body that is convened for the purpose of conducting business related to government proceedings, and those could be committees, it could be school boards, it could be any body that convenes that is going to provide information that will influence in any way town operations. That information and all of the information is subject to right to know, meaning that this committee, in this case, has been brought together with the express purpose of providing recommendations to the town, the taxpayers, and the residents of the town of Ware. When I went out and I heard that information, I said to myself, what's going on here? When I was asked, I said, I'm afraid I'm missing something here. The reason I filed the 91A is because the taxpayers and residents in the town of Ware have a right to all of the information. They have a right to know how this body comes to determine what the recommendations are that you're making to them. So the people who are sitting in this room, this committee, your job is to vet all this information and provide recommendations, which you do an amazing job. Tonight, I watched the budget presentation for the school board. The types of questions that the people in this room asked, it was amazing. It was well done. I encourage you to ask all of the questions. During that meeting that night, we were in an active meeting. Tom, as your chair, asked this group of people, does anyone else have any questions? The room was silent. The chief picked up his stuff, walked out, and was immediately followed out, and the conversation, as Chief Vizina is confirming here, continued. The public has a right to know how you guys make your decisions. They have a right to all the information. So it's the one, I appreciated the note from Mr. Kirk. I appreciated, the fact that he took the time to tell me what his disagreement with me personally was. This isn't about personalities. This is about principles. Unfortunately, I think I have to remind this room, we don't have an ethics committee in the town of Ware. It's, I believe, going to be a pending warrant article.
In the absence of having an ethics committee, I looked at the note that I received from Mr. Kirk, and I reached out to his Secretary of State and conferred with them as to determine whether or not I was within my rights as a citizen in the town of Ware to ask for the right to know. It was conferred, consulted, and it was agreed upon that that was the correct remedy to make sure that the information will be contained in our public record. Taxpayers should be able to track this all the way through the process. They should be able to say, okay, so where did they get the information to make this recommendation that we're gonna, these recommendations are an important part of our process. Understanding how we all, went through these discussions is an important measure to the validity of how this committee does your job. And so I conferred with the Secretary of State. 91A was the correct remedy to be able to make sure that this information from both Chief Moore and Chief Fazina becomes part of our record. I appreciated that Liz got up tonight, talked about her meeting that she had as a one-off so that you all know where she's coming from when she's making her decisions. And so, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. Thank you for following up with the 91A. Thank you for the hard work that you're doing. I just want to remind you, we're here on behalf of taxpayers and residents in Ware. That's the whole reason we're here. And so let's make sure that they can see how you're coming up with your decisions. That's all I'm asking of you, is that the taxpayers have a right to know. So, thank you.
So a copy of the letter, and I will get a copy of the email responses from both chiefs that will be put on the meeting minutes. And the only thing that I will say to this is I'm in agreement. I don't think that discussions outside the body are appropriate, and we'll leave it at that. Any questions? All right. So I'm gonna, at that point, unless there's any final other general thoughts, old business, I think we're ready to wrap. Hold on.
Beth put together these books, that you guys didn't get today.
Oh, yeah, we can grab them on the way out?
From our public hearing.
Okay.
The back page is going to be changed just a little bit, because the warrant articles should be pretty much done. Two, there's three. Tom, did you get one the other night?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Thank you. So you said just the back page will be changed?
Yeah, because it talks about the warrant articles, and she,
Okay.
but it gives you some, you can see the detail and the summary and.
Okay. So, Naomi, are you okay? I think you said you want to send the warrant articles when they're out tomorrow. Are you okay just sending it to the whole committee?
I'll go upstairs and go to my desk.
Yeah, no, I just meant I'm fine if it just goes there. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't have to be
I've been
tonight.
here since 6:30, so it doesn't.
Okay,
Well, I'm not looking at him tonight, Naomi, so don't worry about it.
okay.
I don't know what happened tomorrow.
On a move, we close?
So move.
Would you mind?
So let it be right, so let it be done.
And I never remember, do you shut that off first, or does it not matter?
No, you don't have to do that.
I don't have to do it.